Hey Life Groups, my name is Karen and I oversee outreach at New Life, including Love Gillette, which is our ministry of outreach into our community. This past fall, we transitioned Love Gillette to being a ministry of our life groups. We believe that circles are better than rows, that your best spiritual growth happens in small, intentional community, and that one of the best ways to grow is to serve. Not only will you grow through service, but also Love Gillette is how we take Christ's love outside of the walls of New Life and share it with our community. Each of you becomes a missionary to Gillette. The Bible tells us that we are Christ's ambassadors. Pastors Mike and Paul can't do it alone. All of us have the call to share the gospel, and I think that is awesome. I want to give you a few pointers as your group discusses what Love Gillette projects you might do. Number 1, partnership. The best projects allow New Life to partner with another organization in our community. This multiplies our efforts and ensures that we aren't duplicating the work that someone else is already doing. On your menu, you'll see options to do projects at places like the Women's Resource Center, GARF, the Boys and Girls Club, or Blessings in a Backpack. Number 2, involvement. The best projects involve your entire life group. Don't let this become one person's pet project and leave them on an island. Everyone get involved so you all grow through service together. Third, wide-reaching. The best projects affect multiple people. A good project may reach out to an individual or family, but a great project has the potential to share Jesus with a group. 4, community. The best projects look outside of New Life to make an impact. Your life group should be caring for each other. That is part of being the body of Christ. But that is not a Love Gillette project. A Love Gillette project takes Jesus outside of our church body and cares for those in the community who may not yet know Christ. All that being said, the biggest, the awesomest, the best Love Gillette project you could take part in this spring is Special Prom. There are multiple opportunities for your life group to help us host this night of celebration. Now, I know it sounds a bit overly optimistic, but my goal is to have every single life group participate in a Love Gillette project. I am here to help you with ideas and support, so please talk about what your group project might be and then get in touch with me.
There once was a young man who in his youth professed a desire to become a great writer. He wanted to write stuff that the whole world would react to on a truly emotional level. So, he now works for Microsoft writing error messages. If you don't want to lose documents because you forgot to save them, make a plan in advance to save your progress. Let's talk about it. We spend a lot of time talking about what we should do with our regrets. For example, why do we have to tell people that everyone is welcome at our church? That you can come as you are? We have to say those things because people have regrets, and they think that those regrets disqualify them from a relationship with God. I've spent a lot of time in this series clarifying that even if you have done relationships in the past wrong in an unhealthy way, that doesn't mean you're disqualified. Our past doesn't disqualify us from making good decisions for the future. And it's tempting to only talk about how we should feel about the things that we've done in the past. But actually, that's not the kind of questions that wisdom asks. We are better served to get out in front of these regrets, to keep the regrets from happening in the first place. And that's how Jesus makes our lives better, and he makes us better at life. He helps us to build boundaries that keep us away from sin and pain. The rules that Jesus gave us were given to help us out of debt, to keep us away from adultery, to keep us away from temptation, away from gluttony and obesity. Jesus gave us rules or boundaries to keep us on the healthy side of life. That's because emotions react, wisdom prepares. That's huge. Emotions react, but but wisdom prepares. Emotional decision-making or acting on the impulses only leads us to regret, but wisdom prepares. Wisdom builds boundaries that keep us from regret. A lack of boundaries lead to things like divorce, prison, addictions, debt, big lawyer bills. But boundaries lead to happy marriages, financial freedom, healthy relationships, and a peaceful life. You know this is true because you've experienced it in your own life. But future regrets can be avoided by adding boundaries to our lives now. Wisdom builds boundaries that keep us from regret. Wisdom takes us from consolidate your debt to don't get into debt in the first place. Wisdom gets us out in front of the situation and makes a boundary that keeps us from getting into debt in the first place or falling into any other problem. Did you know that it's been proven that children are happiest when they have specific boundaries in their lives? Several years ago at an elementary school in New York, the playground fences were taken down during a weekend. Nothing was announced, but the kids were watched carefully to see what their reaction would be. Before the removal of the fence, the children ran and played games using the entire schoolyard. But without the boundary, without the fence, the games appeared to be half-hearted, and the children noticeably gathered towards the center of the playground, avoiding the outside. The following weekend, again, with no announcement of any kind to the kids, the fence was put back up. Immediately, the kids again began to use the entire playground. Are we so different from children? When you and I observe boundaries, aren't we happier and more productive in every part of our lives? I believe that the boundaries I observe about what I read, what I eat, how much I eat, what I do, what I say, they actually work to constantly shape me into the person I was created to be. Okay, stop here, answer the first 3 questions, and then push play. We live in a culture that doesn't like boundaries. Our culture would rather gray lines, like drink responsibly. And I don't know what that means to you, but that's a pretty gray line. The problem is that when you're drunk, you're not responsible. So that's not a boundary at all. That just sets us up for failure. So God gave us a more obvious boundary. He said, don't get drunk. So we make a plan to keep ourselves from getting drunk. Because when we're tempted to get drunk, we're not in the right mind to figure it out. So we set up a boundary. Culture says, wait until you're ready. To which every teenage boy says, I'm ready. I was born ready. So wise Christians say, wait until you're married. That's a healthy, very clear boundary. And here's the worst of the worst. Culture says, listen to your heart. Listen to my what? What does that even mean? Are you saying that I should listen to my emotions? My emotions got me into this mess in the first place. So wisdom says, listen to God, to truth, to concrete, verifiable truth. And this argument becomes very public and controversial pretty often. For example, it became public and controversial when Billy Graham had a rule that he would not allow himself to be alone with women. Billy Graham knew that if he were alone with a woman, he would be tempted to follow his emotions instead of his wisdom. So he built a boundary. He wouldn't be alone with women. People started to call it the Billy Graham rule. In the last election, people found out that Mike Pence has the same rule. So now people call it the Mike Pence rule. And people criticize Mike Pence for building a boundary. But what if Mike Pence didn't build that boundary and he was caught in an affair because of it? Because he didn't build that boundary in the first place? Well, He'd probably be dealing with Michael Avenatti or some other lawyer because he'd be in trouble. In that case, culture wouldn't just make fun of him, they would crucify him. They would call him a hypocrite. Ephesians 5:15-18 says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise." So wisdom is the goal here. Wisdom builds boundaries, making the most of every opportunity. Why? Because the days are evil. We don't have much time on this earth, so be careful with your time. We don't have time for regrets. Live your life wisely because we have a lot of work to do and a short amount of time to do it. And I've heard people use this passage to talk about the good old days, about the things, about how the world's getting worse and worse. But remember, this passage was written 2,000 years ago. That's the world he was talking about. In other words, as long as we are on this earth, back then or now, Satan is going to try to knock us off course. That's not new to today. That's always been the case. So if you want to keep Satan from succeeding, build guardrails. Okay, stop here, answer the last two questions, and I will see you Sunday in church.